Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, the voice of bodybuilding. And today's voice is the one, my one, and only Matt James. So, as always, I still want to show gratefulness for Matt giving up his time to come on the podcast. And we are, of course, you'd need to watch the YouTube video to see. We're assisted by 𝗏𝗏. 𝗏𝗏 is here, and Matt, Lisbeth will be happy to know, has fully immersed in the mode of Professor Matt. Now, you coined that phrase from Beth, who's a client of ours, and he recently had an eye test, and it shows that he does need glasses. So we, like I say, we are assisted today with 𝗏𝗏 and glasses. So thank you, Matt, for coming on today.
It's my pleasure. And the glasses, who knew that you're supposed to have an eye test as an adult, right? and just before we delve into our topic of today, is for eye strain, because who else knew that staring at a screen for 10 to 12 hours a day might strain your eyes, people? So check your eyes out. We'll get someone else to check your eyes out, if you might think your eyes are fine. And use your crutches if you've got bad leg.
Well, yeah.
There you go. Profound statements.
Two things that we've learned over here in Thailand. And on that note, when Matt first potentially thought there was some eye strain going on from our friend Sam, that said that it could be from having some mild headaches, etc., he said to me, "Do you have to get your eye tested as an adult?" And I was like, okay, let's have a little lesson in life here. Because my mum has had several eye tests, appointments for eye strain, because she also works from a computer. So there is our lessons learned. But today we're going to be talking about the brain mind fuckery of scale weight. Now, recently, really over the last couple of months, Matt and I have spoken about doing this episode, and Desi, who listens, who is a Switzerland listener all over the globe, the podcast, I actually shared some stories, and she said this is what we need as competitors, and she is a successful competitor herself. The education around scale weight. And I've always said it, well, for quite some time, that this is not Weight Watchers, this is physique development. And of course, you agree. But that doesn't stop it fucking with your head. Now, let's be honest, as competitors, as bodybuilders in general, we use scale weight as a measure of what phase we're in, right? So for sure, it's going to bring about certain thoughts and feelings. And I don't say that phrase lightly, because, you know, all joking aside and being completely honest, for at least 10 years, and only really up until recently, myself, you know, particularly for those 10 years, and having spent, I think it's probably around 12 years now as a bodybuilder, that I was completely controlled by scale weight. So I would step on the scales every single day. We're thinking 10 years here, guys. And that would depict how my day was. And that's, you know, like I say, no joking aside, it would be, I would stand on the scales, and it doesn't matter what fucking phase I'm in. And it would be like, okay, so whatever this number is, that is how I'm going to feel for the day. And it's rough. It really is. And another reason to get Matt on today to talk about this is to get a male point of view. And I remember a podcast I did with 𝗬𝗵𝗵. And right at the end of the episode, I said to him about scale weight, and, you know, he spoke about the struggles there. And recently I did a podcast with Alex, who's a natural bodybuilding champion. And he also said, you know, it is really tough. And I think that sometimes we can overlook that actually it's not a gender specific thing. Male, you know, bodybuilders, competitors, however you want to frame it, do have hang-ups and stressors around scale weight. So in this episode, we're going to talk about what can cause scale weight fluctuations, the other measures of progress, and some really, really simple things that will hopefully help if, you know, you are experiencing troubles, just to give that baseline. Okay, so how do we actually measure scale weight? Because you know, I think as advanced, you know, bodybuilders, competitors, we can often forget that actually things like placement of your scales, where you do your weigh-ins, time of day, all of these things, actually sometimes those basics we've both come across as coaches can sometimes be missed. So I'm sure that's something that you'd be happy to start with and talk about, you know, how we actually look at, is this a reliable measure of progress?
Yeah, sure. I think that when you're looking at scale weight, when it is down to physique development, which is what we're specifically talking about, how are you quantifying and measuring the scale weight progression, either moving north or south, so whether you're losing weight or gaining weight, in terms of if you're losing it, how do you know that the weight that you're losing, I would assume, not that we like to assume, but if we do, that we're looking to lose body fat, how do we associate that it is body fat that we are losing and it is not just glycogen and water that's being depleted as we pull our carbohydrates and such? For instance, when we first make a major adjustment, when we're coming into a dieting phase, that might be where we make our biggest adjustment. Maybe we up steps and we also reduce food. Maybe that's going to come from predominantly carbohydrates. So therefore, you're going to see a bigger drop. So that's going to be a big win for a lot of people because that's a big drop. You could see, you know, a few pounds come off, you know, and then if you're someone who's dieting for the first time and you get into the groove, you could see quite a considerable amount. Now that's setting a standard. Now, when we're looking at what that weight is, it's important to understand where those things can come from. And when it comes to training and it comes to progressing, when it comes to scale weight escalations, you have things like your training performance and you have training intensity and you have the inflammatory response of training. So it's important to understand what weight actually is, which is everything all encompassed. Your gravitational pull, if you will, to the earth at any one moment in time. Drink some water in the morning, you've gained weight. You haven't gained any body fat, you've just consumed water, you've consumed no calories over that time. And sometimes we can say these things and we can talk about these things and you can see a post about these things. But just like you will have like wins throughout the day, or you'll be mindful, and maybe people are journaling and doing things like that, sometimes taking note of these things and saying, okay, and I've seen people do it before where they'll drink some water, they'll drink from the scales and go, okay, wait a minute. And it almost, and it almost normalizes the fact that your scale weight's gone up, but all you've done is drank some water. And that can then add some more context to what scale weight truly is. And understanding, and I say this to clients, if we want to move and manipulate your body weight, and that's all we're talking about, I can move and manipulate your body weight very easily because I can change your electrolyte balance, I can change your fluid balance, I can remove some training, I can, you know, try to get you to sleep a little bit more, I can give you some supplements that would help you sleep a little bit better and therefore pull off some stress, and your scale weight would go down. But I haven't at any particular moment in time increased your steps, increased your cardio, or reduced your food, but your weight's gone down. And when you have this kind of context and you talk to clients and you notice trends, and I think that's something that is important that we talk about, is everyone's individualized response to a diet or a gaining phase, or differences between someone training and someone else training in their response to scale weight escalations, inflammation, all of the things that can impact your scale weight. So when we are talking about scale weight, what we're really talking about is everything that you do from when you wake and weigh yourself to when you wake up again the following day and weigh yourself. And the question that you have to ask yourself, and the question that I've asked myself, is can I control every single variable through the day, every single day, during whatever phase, year in, year out, where that is the same wake time, the same sleep time, the same water intake, the same time that I'm having all those things, the same electrolytes, the same amount of stress, the same amount of interactions, and all of those things. And the answer is always going to be a resounding no. Even if you get a robot, even if you get someone who thinks they can do all of that, your emotions can swing and shift, or your bodies, even if it is not your conscious, it's your subconscious, how things happen to you during the day. Your perception can be different, and that can trigger an emotional response, be that one that you're present with, or be that one that physiologically your body responds to. I think that's important to know, is there's so many levels to play around at any one time.
Then that's where sometimes the complexities come in. And I think from my standpoint, from having such a hard relationship with scale weight, no matter how much education I had, it was still inside my head. And before we sort of go into the psychology of it, some of the things that you mentioned there, I think it'd be good to delve into a little bit more. So you started with the transition of phases and the volume of food. So it's a very good example of, depending on the person as an individual, how you can see a scale weight drop that is down to essentially food volume alone. Now, when I say the individual, I know myself, and it depends on your coach and how you do the different phases. But really, when I went from off season to the start of a prep, my food volume was quite similar, because I've always prioritized micronutrients. So whether that's going to be veggies or a big salad, it was a similar food volume. So for myself, there'd almost be more of an accurate display of, if, when the scale weight goes down, if that's essentially body fat coming off, compared to someone if they pushed really high on the food in an off season, and might not be as relative for a lot of the females that listen, the heavily muscled females, this will, be slightly different for. But if you push food quite high, and then as a good example, you've gone into a harsh mini cut or a short prep, and, overnight, your calories have drastically changed, there could be so much more of a drop in that first week, 2 weeks, even the first couple of days, because of food volume alone. And there's also, I remember you explaining this to a client, where that can sometimes be almost a little bit blurring of lines as to how someone would see their progress. So, a client may say, well, we've just taken food volume out, so I'm not losing fat. I think that's something we can expand on, because then it's trying to keep that motivation there for someone that has gone from high food to lower food, volume wise. How do you keep that motivation there when the first couple of weeks there's a lot of weight coming down on the scales, and then suddenly there's not?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of this will happen prior to the client actually experiencing it, especially if, you're always going to have the ability, even if you sign a new client, in my experience, and this is something that I think coaches need to take relevance on, is the importance that your words carry a measurable weight for the potential of every single person that you talk to.
In every single check-in, in every single interaction.
100%. Because your words, and we must remember that you are essentially controlling someone's everyday life. Besides their work start and end point, but you're telling them how much water to drink throughout the day, what their meals are specifically, how they orchestrate like the organization of their day outside of the fixed parameters, what to do when it comes to sleep, stress, all of the interactions, you're having at least some impact. Not everybody, but a good majority of people will at least take something from what you say. And there will be those out there that will hang off your every word. So when it comes down to the inflection of how you are talking about scale weight, how you are responding to changes that are happening. For example, if your client goes through some of these changes in the first week and you make some adjustments and you go, oh my God, you lost 7 pounds this week. That's incredible. That is now the benchmark. 7 pounds is incredible and everything else is less than incredible. So now what do you do?
Very good point.
Because that is then every single week, that is your now benchmark, or that is their perceived benchmark. And your reaction, especially if you're doing video check-ins and feedbacks to people, then they are watching your face, they are seeing it light up, and it's exciting. I understand it, but we must lay relevance, especially when we understand, and we can go, this is a big change that's happened. But before you even get there, I feel like and this is something that I do with clients, and I know you talk about it as well, is when you're going in and you're changing things, you're saying, look, this is the change, this is the adjustment that we're making. We're having more volume, or we're having more food, and we're having this, and this could potentially do this, and this could potentially do that, and you're going to have more water in, and that could see a drop off of the overall fluid that you're holding on to, and then you're putting your training in. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw your scale weight move quite a bit in the first couple of weeks as we do that. And it can go up and down and swing around because we're doing X, Y, Z. And then you're setting, exactly, but then you're setting the expectation. And if you don't know what is going to happen with that person because you are changing that many things, just say, I don't know what is absolutely going to happen, but what I do know is that this will do this, i.e. if you're putting them into a deficit, you're going to start moving towards that, and you're going to start seeing trends and drop-offs in terms of body fat over a period of time, and you're changing their nutrients and all of these things. And if you know what that impact is going to have, then you can give some relevance. But being honest, being open, and being intentful with the words that you choose, I think is absolutely important, and setting the scene for that client. And then when you do get those wins, giving context based upon what you said before. Because not only does it give the client what they need, which is, you know, assurance, it's also information, it's education. And depending on the level of client that you've got, you don't need to go into all the nuances, you don't need to go into all of those things, but you do need to cover it, and you do need to make sure that that is something that they're expecting. And then when it does happen, the cool thing is they go, oh, you said that might happen. That's really cool. And then that is more buy-in for you as well as a coach, because you are predicting something essentially, but you're also educating people. And the best response you can get from a client who is kind of focused around scale weight and who is kind of having that previous experience, be that going it alone, be it in other clubs and diets, is, oh, I understand why that hasn't moved, or it has moved in this way. And then they teach it back to you and they go, am I on the right track? And it's like, yeah, 100%. Like, that's the stuff that you can get behind and go, yeah, this is amazing. Like, wow, like you really understand your body more, because that's what you're doing now. And that's what we're trying to educate you on, and you're trying to educate yourself on, is how your body responds to the inputs and the outputs, which is training, nutrition, stress, sleep, all of these things that not only move the needle of progression in terms of how much muscle mass you have, how much body fat you have, but also that step that we stand on, and they can have so much weight within our day.
Excuse me.
Exactly. I just rolled out there. So I think that's an important kind of section to talk on.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like it's certainly something that needs to be delivered in a certain way, right? So education, like you said, some clients don't need to know the ins and outs of everything to the depth of potentially what we would know, because they want to understand and grow with you. So this is another reason why having a coach for a long period of time is brilliant, because you get that opportunity for the client to grow with you. I'm sure you'll agree with that, in regards to not only are they almost educating themselves back to you, but you can be a bit more in depth as you go through that journey. But that journey could be years. And that is exciting for us as coaches, but also for the client. So when they start saying in the check-in, this has happened, I've seen my scale weight go up, and I think this is why. It's so fulfilling for us, isn't it? Because it's like, that's what I mentioned this on the podcast with John that will go live next week. Scale weight was an example of, for myself as a competitor and struggling for 10 years with this, day in, day out for those 10 years, I want to offer 10 years, 12 years entirety of being a competitor. I want to be able to minimize the shit and hell that I went through to a minimal impact for my clients. And if that client is receptive, this is the type of thing that happens. And it's just, like I say, so fulfilling to have that. But when we actually then look at, the individual things that can affect scale weight, it still doesn't come away from that psychology that I mentioned. So I wanted to talk about the food volume first, because I think that that is a very, very good example for lifestyle clients, for competitors, for anyone in this realm. You know, even if you're not in physique development, you listen to the podcast, it gives you some clarity into something that may be overlooked, that seems quite simple if you know, but if you don't know, it's like, well, I lost, your example, 7 pounds in the first week. Well, I've only lost half a pound the second week. What the fuck's going on? I've done everything the same as I should have, and I've done everything the same in the first week. What's happening here? And it is for sure that education initially to say, we're going into a diet phase, you know, this may, excuse me, this may happen, but it also may not happen. So almost like, you know, when someone goes into a diet phase for the first time with me, there's almost like the check-in is almost like a tutorial into things that might happen, things that might not. Now, you don't want to then, and you've said this multiple times, you know, when we've spoken about how we deliver our coaching services, because we align in all areas of that. You don't want to put words in people's mouths, and you learned that a long time ago, and that's something we speak about. So there is almost, and that's where I come back to the delivery of this, and like you said, you know, what you say sticks. So if I say to someone, your scale weight will definitely go up because of X, there's almost this, you're planting a seed of it should go up. So if you're in a growth phase, or your scale weight will definitely go down because we've changed food volume. But that might be a hella stressful week, and their scale weight goes up. So it is certainly that delivery, and any coaches that listen, you know, it is very, very relevant to remember that, because the psychology to all of the areas of physique development that comes from a coach, it's so important, because if you didn't have scale weight hang-ups before getting into this physique development journey, where did that come from? So is it something that's unearthed in you, or is it something that you've, you know, somehow you've joined dots in your own mind from the coach that you have? Is it because you watch other people and they are putting their scale weight and what it should be? What are the reasons? And I think that's certainly something for anyone listening that does struggle with scale weight. And hopefully the amount of education we give in this episode is going to help for sure. But a good point of call is to go, when did this start? There is also a lot of merit in people that have struggled with scale weight before starting bodybuilding. And you know, this is something that's very, very important to me as a coach. And for anyone that reaches out from the podcast, was there something going on before you've then got into bodybuilding and it's unearthed that again? Was there behaviors, whether that's disordered thoughts, eating, they're probably the best examples. Was this happening before you got into the sport? Because there is certainly that sort of grey area, clouded area, whatever you want to frame that as to bodybuilding did this to me. And you know, this is something that's, I feel like it's very important to me, not only because of what bodybuilding has brought me, of course. Everyone that listens knows what bodybuilding is for me. You know, it is my religion. Matt says if you cut me, my blood type will be BB. Because it's my everything. And, you know, having periods away from it, I've realized even more so that it is my everything and it is my passion. And, you know, when it is thrown that bodybuilding did this to me, I think it's important for the individual to pick apart, was there something there that was either dormant, or, you know, even why did you get into bodybuilding? Was there some levels of lack of control in your life? Is there some trauma there? Is there serial dieting there? Have you been part of tribes and clubs that have controlled you through scale weight? Were those things present either when you started or years before? You know, food disorders as a good example, that essentially, you know, if we're talking of the more the anorexic route, you know, scale weight is definitely going to be a thing there. Well, I say definitely, but ordinarily, you know, there is that wanting to lose and see the scale weight be at a certain number or be, you know, coming down. Has bodybuilding almost that control that you gain, that pushing into preps where you're getting off on losing scale weight, has that reignited something that was there in the past? Now, when we talk about that, it's a fucking touchy subject, because it is, when you've come from a background of trauma, and I speak from experience myself, when you've come from a background of disordered eating or any of these things, for a coach to speak to you about that, and this is something for the listeners to consider, you know, if your coach is essentially pressing you on this and asking more details, are you holding back? Are your defense mechanisms kicking in? Because it is not nice to have questions asked about something that is traumatic for you. And that's quite hard as a coach.
Yeah, 100%. When you ask people to divulge, because some people will come to you and they won't know you that well. Others will have watched content and feel like they know you a little bit more. But still, this is someone random, technically, that you're reaching out to. And as I said earlier, you know, that person is then having control or at least some input over the vast majority of your life. And to open up to somebody and allow them, let them in completely or fully with some of the things that are the most maybe precious to you in terms of, yeah, because it is something where you are just not necessarily comfortable. I know this for a fact from, you know, clients who have never spoken about some of these things to anybody else besides myself, and to this day that is still true. So how do you put all of your trust in that one person? And that goes both ways, because you also have to be able to be trusted with that information and pay attention to it. And if it's not in your remit, to know how to navigate that conversation as well, because there will be cases and there will be times where you will encounter someone who tells you that they wish to achieve a goal, and you know, given their previous experiences, their previous or their current setups, or their thought behaviors and their patterns of both, you know, training and nutrition, because there are people who throw themselves into training, that actually delivering them on that will potentially exacerbate some of those thoughts and feelings or bring them back full tilt. And again, this is where you as a coach have to pay even more attention to that client to ensure that you do your due diligence to make sure that, and this was something that I learned ultimately, and it's a little bit difficult, more difficult with bodybuilding, because bodybuilding is such an extreme sport, is everything that you do as a coach pushes that person towards a healthier version of himself.
As a lifestyle.
As a lifestyle. But then even when it comes to bodybuilding or extremes, so that can be extremes of training, if you know someone has a tendency to overtrain, to really use exercise as a way of punishing themselves, or, you know, whatever medium that comes out as, it's kind of overtraining or pushing themselves more and more and more to a negative outcome for their overall health, well-being and longevity, because again, that person can only do that for so long before you may no longer have sort of input on that. There is a certain element that you have to, you know, take charge of that, and you have to take some ownership for, again, when we talk about how you've spoken to that person, the words that you choose, the actions that you choose to support. And this is where, when you do go into coaching, being aware that it is a relationship that you're building with someone, it is someone that you're talking to about literally everything when you're looking to take your physique to the ultimate level, which is ultimately what bodybuilding is, because you're getting down to the lowest body fat levels ever. You're doing the most amount of cardio steps, you're eating the least amount of food, and your sleep is getting disrupted to a maximum level. It's having an impact, it can't not, on everything that you do in your life. So when you're doing that, it is important for both client and coach to understand that that relationship is a very powerful one, and it can be one that helps and or hinders. And we know this from, well, I know this from personal coaching experiences myself, and also clients who come to me from the coaches as well. So I've experienced both ends of those things, where that hasn't been done. And I can speak personally from when I've received information from a coach and that information has not been well thought out, when I wasn't in such a powerful position in terms of my knowledge and my experience, that really, really hit me very hard and caused me to lose a portion of control over my actions because I had something that had been every day, something that had been, and what I'm referring to here is where I used to have the same food day in, day out, week in, week out. I used to follow the same food prep, and then I was introduced to 𝗵𝗁𝗋 macros, and then that caused my relationship with food to worsen due to the fact of having now no input, and now I can have anything within these food choices as long as they hit these carbs, fats, and proteins, and I introduced a world of food back into my diet that just was not there for years and years and years. And that, exactly, and that was just a miscalculated approach by that coach. And I don't believe that it was done with malice. I just believe that it was done without the thought of, I'm taking someone from literally the reins are on every single day, day in, day out, never missed a meal, year in, year out, have not done that, to now you have the world at your feet and all you have is these three numbers to them. Go and do your absolute best and worst. And that took me a long time to recover and recoup from. And then in later coaching experiences where I was more switched on, was more knowledgeable, I had things that triggered a thought process, but then I was able to work through it before I took action that would have been and carried negative consequences. And that again is another example of being aware of what you're saying to someone and what they might think as they go forward. And this kind of relates back to what
yeah, I think that actually we could, I didn't, well, we sort of, we know an outline of what we're going to talk about, but I didn't actually consider, and you probably didn't, that that would come up in regards to food plans versus if it fits your macros. And I think that would be a valuable conversation actually in regards to the effect that certain foods can have on scale weight, but also your relationship with food, and that also veering into your relationship with scale weight. And something that I personally like to do as a coach when flexing between food plans and flexible dieting, all of my clients are doing something different right now. They're doing a slightly different amendment to either a food plan day in, day out, a food plan and incorporating flexible dieting as well over a graduated period of time. So a good example is a prep, being on a rigid food plan like you described, coming through a reverse out, and also being on a food plan after, of course, the post-show period, etc. But still facilitating, you know, even post-show, it's like we need that plan there. You know, it's so fucking important. And I say it like that because it is. I've, you know, been told, and I think again, maybe a misjudgment, not malice, but have whatever you want. Now that is not good when you've dieted for 40+ weeks. And again, I speak from experience here. And then to graduate into, you know, a food plan, get into a growth phase, and then we start a little bit of flexible dieting around, you know, a certain meal or you know, something like this. Or have clients that are completely flexible dieting. I also have clients that have ranges of macros, and that can either be through flexible dieting or a food plan structure. And this is an example of how different, how vast nutrition is depending on the person. I think that sometimes in the competitive realms, food plans can be given and then the client is shit scared to even think about what it would even look like to control their nutrition. Now, I personally feel that if you have a client that's come to you that's only ever done food plans, or you've only ever done food plans with them, say, you know, pretty much straight away you're going to a maintenance and then we're in a prep or a diet, and a food plan has been the only way. I personally feel in an off season and a growth phase, it's an excellent time to start allowing your client to trust themselves. And that's something that is scary as a competitor or someone that's even done a harsh diet, you know, it might be a photo shoot, etc. Starting to give a little bit of the reins to the client that has only ever known a food plan is such a nice experience, part of the journey, the building of the trust for you and the client, but the client to trust themselves. Then the incorporation of off-plan meals. But we both know that's quite a scary place to be when you're told you can eat whatever you want. You've done a harsh diet, do whatever you want. You've done a prep, do whatever you want. I'll do whatever I want then. The fucking scale weight fluctuations off the back of that, and I'm sure there's going to be people listening going, holy shit. You know, we personally know, and I've mentioned this on the pod before, competitors that have gained circa of 20 kilograms in a 6-week period. And they cannot stop eating. For me, I don't think anything other than I want to help that person. I wish I could help that person. And the examples that we've got are people that have got coaches already, and we do not overstep the mark. That's not our vibe. We don't want to do that. And that's, again, something that we're proud of and we will stick by, because not the one. We don't step on toes. However, when I hear these stories, it brings an emotion out in me now, and I've been crying on way too many pods recently, but how must that feel to be in the best shape of your life, and 6 weeks later, you maybe even weigh more than when you started your prep? And the psychology behind that, there's two sides of this, right? And this is something 𝗵𝗵𝗃 and I spoke about. Is it the client or is it the coach that hasn't delivered a plan? So has the client been given a plan and then they haven't followed it, and this has led to a substantial amount of weight gain? Or has the coach not provided a plan, and then, you know, I would say particularly as first timers, but this is when you're absolutely fucked from prep. This applies to all competitors. Is it that you haven't been given a plan post-show, and this has led to, consequently, you falling off the wagon, or however you want to label that, and then you've ended up in this position? And it's got to be a scary, scary spot to be in. And yeah, the daily torment you're going to go through, and then that lead into, if it does get to the point where you can't stop eating, we know post-diet what the appetite is like, the effect of the hunger hormones, and that drive to eat because you're not at a healthy body weight, and that overtaking. Yes, there is merit in the consideration towards your stomach shrinking, or, you know, it is labeled in different ways. However, you can put it away. And I know that, you know that. If this then leads to the likelihood of you increasing your calorie intake every single day, and you can't get out of essentially a disordered way of eating, thinking and feeling. And I think that there's an element of, you could get to a point where the food tastes so delicious and you're so fucked off the back of a prep that there can be fuck it moments, and there can be moments of, this food is my priority right now. And that can be a physiological effect as well. We're not meant to be this body weight, guys. And you know, I talk about this on my social media and on the podcast. We're not meant to be shredded to the bone. And gender specific, when we look at females, we're born to procreate. So we're born to have body fat. It is not normal for us to push into these territories. And even, you know, if you're not as skinned as some of the other categories or some of the other competitors, this still may be the first time you're experiencing a lower level of body fat. And physiologically, your body doesn't want to be there. And then if you're eating through desire, you're in that trap, or, you know, this sort of circle of eating more and leading by desire, and then these fuck it moments, and those fuck it moments becoming every day, then what happens when you get to that position where, as our example of 20 plus kilos, 6 weeks after a show, what do you do to reclaim that? And, you know, this doesn't happen to everyone, and it's not, I wouldn't say it's something that happens to even a lot of people, but the people it does, or if you've done a show and then you decide, fuck that, and this happens, this even happens partway through a prep. People think, I ain't fucking doing that. I don't want to do that. Because it's hard, guys. It is hard. And if you're not doing it for the right reasons, or you think it's a good idea, then you think, shit, this isn't a good idea. Is there a likelihood, and back to where that example of, was there something in the past? Could that rear its head? For sure it could. For sure. Also, if your circumstances change during a prep, you go through a breakup, you lose your job, these types of things, you may well pull out of the prep and find yourself in this habitual behavior. Or you might complete the prep, decide to put these things to the back of your mind, and guess what? For a lot of people, it comes out when you've completed the goal and you're in no man's land. And I'm sure many, many of the listeners will experience this. And this is even for something like a photo shoot. You get to that goal and everyone is hyped for you. You're hyped. Where's everyone gone 2 weeks later? Because you're not the talk of the town anymore. And I'll always bring up that analogy that Sonia said, you know, everyone is behind you. You complete the goal. Nobody's there when your spoon is in the jar of the peanut butter and you cannot stop. Nobody's there. You're left on your own. And whether this is the client that has, you know, decided to go off on their own tangent, whether this is that you haven't been given a plan, whatever situation or scenario you find yourself in to lead you to excessive weight gain, and almost our topic today, bringing it back to scale weight, you almost, that goes out the window, your worries of scale weight. So you've been so tied into it for the diet phase, and then it might be that you actually can't step on the scales again. You know, and when you do, it's horrific for you. It's a very bad experience. But that ties into our subject today, because then you have a negative affinity to the scale weight because you don't know what the fuck to do. So perhaps we could talk about, you know, some useful tools, some anecdote, some education as to, if you find yourself getting to a body weight that you maybe don't even know how much you've gained, you know your physique has changed, your eating has gone out the window, how would you start to reintroduce behaviors that you're exhibiting in a diet phase? And how would you reintroduce scale weight as a vector of progress?
It's a very nuanced topic for a lot of people, because your response is going to be very different to some other people's. So when we're talking about essentially implementing some structure once again within your day-to-day habits, routines, and rituals around food, maybe even exercise, it would be looking at what is the lowest hanging fruit for you. So in terms of when it comes to food, does the thought of food just petrify you? Has your activity, you know, completely gone out the window as well? Are you looking to overcompensate with activity? Are you looking, like, is your sleep absolutely destroyed? Is your stress on another level because of other factors? Do you have any clear, you know, vantage point or goals in mind as to what you're looking to do? And this would be where, if your goal, the immediate goal you have, and it comes to you is, I need to diet, I need to lose this body fat, and to get my weight back down, that is going to be one of the furthest things from the actual route initially, straight away, because you're going straight back into a restriction, as opposed to addressing some of the thoughts and feelings. And again, that's going to be nuanced. But if you look at your sleep, for example, how is that? Is that impacted by how you're feeling? And if so, can you get that back on track a little? Because we know that that's a big factor, especially if you're post-show, if you're on post-diet phase, if you're going through that phase where you are, you know, getting a lot of food in over a period of time, and you're wanting to get some structure back in your day. One of the best ways that you can do that is to start and end the day. So have something calm, have something relaxing before you're going to bed, do something that is going to be able to chill you out, that isn't in the presence of food, that isn't in the presence of having to think about food. And then when you're waking up, what are your first thoughts? Is there a way that you can have an intervention in that first portion of the day if your immediate thing is, I'm going to go to the fridge? Or can you do something else? Can you write down how you feel immediately when you go? And it doesn't need to be writing it down. I'm not personally a big fan of writing things down. I like to use the dictation function on my phone. It's one of the best things I did when I was away traveling in Australia, when I was out by myself, walking alone with my thoughts. To get my thoughts out, I just dictated what I was actually thinking, and to see the words on the page helped me massively to understand at the core, because I flow so freely with my words when they come out, and it happens a lot faster than I can put pen to paper or type it out. That helps massively. So even just to have that intention of saying, well, how do I actually feel today? Again, if you haven't got a coach, or if you haven't got a coach that you can speak to on this level, that can help massively just by understanding who you are, what you're thinking, what your fears are for the day, what your wins are immediately off the back of that day. And again, you're starting to implement some baseline structure. And when it comes to food, when it comes to the environment you're in, how has the environment changed around food from where you were when you were dieting, right? Where you were just doing a normal lifestyle before, in terms of the foods that you're surrounded by, the holistic foods that you're picking and choosing, your view on food. Like, these are all things that you don't want to just assume. Again, going back to the dictation side of things, writing these things down and looking at it. And this is something that certainly, if you have a coach, talking to your coach about this, like, how do you see food in the rawest, truest form? Like, I know that I have felt before where I just want to eat food. I'm not even focused on what that food is. I just want to eat that food. I just know that that food tastes nice, and that I can eat and eat and eat and eat, and I have a big appetite, and I just want to eat. Sometimes I have eaten because I'm just immeasurably sad. Sometimes because I'm immeasurably happy. Sometimes for no reason at all. And again, sometimes there is just no reason that you are doing those things. Well, if you don't have a coach that you can speak to, and if you don't have people around you that do know, and I found myself in this scenario, in this situation, then you can use yourself as your own kind of advisor. And this is something that I do with clients, where I will ask them what they think they should do, or I ask them what they think the answer is.
If they were the coach and was presented with, this has happened this week.
Exactly. Or you can use the example of, and I've used this before with friends, with their own scenario and situation. Say, look, this was me. If this was, you know, that with your friends, this was such and such, what would you advise them to do? And then you can play it back. And then you play it back and logically you think, okay, well, this is what I would do. This is the intervention that this is the change and adjustment that I would make. Because what has happened over the overall time scale, time frame that you've been doing this, since you've come in, you've changed and manipulated your food, your activity, your expenditure, you've watched your body change, you've felt your body change, you've probably felt your mindset change, your psychology, your thoughts, your feelings, your perception of food, your taste for food is astronomically different. You can have a black coffee for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks with no sweetener, nothing else in it. And then you put milk in.
Apart from a 𝗧𝗵𝗲.
Yeah. Is that sweetener? Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Why are you using 5? How come you've lost 8 pounds? Nothing, don't sound
300 calories by 𝗧𝗵𝗲.
Yeah. So when it comes to putting a sweetener back in the coffee, and then adding milk to it, it's like you've discovered what I hear crack is like. I don't actually know, but apparently it's like crack.
Yeah.
And when you consider that all that has happened in that time is you've added milk, which is a basic
Human thing.
yes,
A normal.
people will have in their house on an everyday basis. Yeah, bodybuilders will not have milk, or they will not have all of these things. And if you can transform black coffee into tasting so delicious, and we're not talking about a mocha chocolate frappa latte, we're talking about just something that has such a small adjustment, then think about the magnification of food and how the entire landscape of food has changed for you. That is not a small thing that's happened during this time. So therefore, we shouldn't treat it like just a small thing. Like, I should just be able to get back into my normal routine. I should be able to do this. I should do it. And look at what you have done during this time. You are the leanest you've ever been. You might also be the most heavily muscled that you've ever been. You might be the biggest body weight you've ever been when you push up to that level. Whatever it might be, you have pushed to your version of your extreme. You're the only person that you can have a measure it to. So it doesn't matter how skinny anyone else was. It doesn't matter anything else over that time. You have pushed the boundaries of what is possible for you. And therefore, over that period of time, because we are habitual in nature, this is why losing weight is so hard in itself for the majority of people, bodybuilders excluded, because you guys just absolutely love losing body fat and you do it like nobody else does.
That's the problem.
Yeah, 100%. That's a problem. It's a good problem and a bad problem to have, right? You know, you make it look easy, but this is the whole point. Anyone can lose weight. Anyone can lose body fat for a short period of time following any particular diet, as long as that diet creates a calorie deficit. The majority of us know that by now. If you didn't know that listening to this, then that is absolute fact. So anyone can lose that, but what is the hardest thing about it? And it's maintaining the weight off or reversing out to a point where you're able to maintain it. And why is that the hardest part? Because realizing that the things that you did to get where you were are not the things that you need to continue to repeat to end up where you want to be. And whether or not that is just getting back to a health phase, a maintenance phase, and before then pushing up again, or whether that is to just lose body weight to then get to a maintenance point to then keep the physique that you've built. There's a reason that that's the hardest part, and that's because you've had a single goal, you've had a single date, or a single set of numbers that you're trying to get to, and then you got to it, and then, well, now I do a reverse out, now I do a health phase. And unless you're emotionally bought into that, and it's the pinnacle of importance for you, and you understand the weight of that, and again, if you're a first timer, the likelihood of that is probably very low because you have not experienced these things. And as much as someone can tell you, and this is like when you're a young kid and older people tell you, well, you want to appreciate having time while you've got it. You know, you think getting older is all good and all gravy, but no, you have all these responsibilities. And you're like, yeah, but I just want to drive a car, get drunk, take some drugs, and have my own house.
Have sex?
Yeah.
Come on.
Well, yeah, in the house, in the car, out in public. And when you are hearing of people, oh, the reverse out is incredibly hard. This is incredibly hard. That is incredibly hard. It's very hard to quantify listening to someone how hard it truly is. And it's going to hit you differently than it hits everyone else. And this is where, when it comes down to making the changes, making the adjustments, and starting to tweak your habits, your routines, your rituals, your daily structure to get back into a rhythm where you are being kind to yourself, where you are moving forward with your version of progress from the point that you find yourself in, if you find yourself at this point where you've gained exponential amounts of weight, where you have patterns of behavior where you feel like you're not able to control it. It's bringing it all back, giving yourself credit for what you've done, and then just steadily breaking down exactly where you're at there and then starting to just re-implement some structure. But again, giving weight to what you've done. And I think that's what people don't often do, what I don't very rarely hear talked about. Because it is a truly incredible thing when you push your body to that limit. But equally, it is a limit, and there are going to be repercussions out the back of that. And the main thing is starting to just redevelop some form of habits and patterns where you feel like you're back in the groove, back in the driving seat.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, when you, like you say, they're giving merit to what you've achieved, when you are, and there will be listeners that have been in this for the long game, you forget what you're putting your body through. And I haven't gained clarity to this myself until I've had a longer off season. Now, the listeners will know for 10 years, I competed back-to-back season to season. The longest off season I had was 10 months. And on reflection, it's not long enough. And from having these shorter spaces of time, you're in one phase, then you're in another phase, you're suddenly on stage, then you're in another, and it's like, it's constant. And I know myself, really it was when I met you and you were like, fucking hell, you're a proper bodybuilder. And I was like, this is what everyone does. And you were like, well, no, it's not. And I started to self-actualize that, you know, the degree that I prep to, I've never cheated on my diet. I've never, ever not followed the plan. Not only because I want to make my coach proud, because I want to make myself proud. But what that brings about is an inherent fear of gaining weight in an off season. And now I'm at this point, around the 72 kilo mark, I'm like, wow, I feel pretty good. Because I've got so much clarity as to what I have put my body through. And now scale weight feels very, very different to me. And I'm talking about that honestly. I'm not institutionalized and imprisoned by what I weigh. That number is not going to control my life anymore. If and when I go into another prep, obviously we've had an operation come out of the blue and such like, you know, the plans were to do a mini cut, but that is not achievable for me right now. My health is much more important. Could I have ever put myself in that scenario before where my health was more important than my body composition and being in a diet phase? No, honestly, no. And I spoke about this on a post the other day. When I fractured my ankle 4 weeks out from the show, I heard the crack, I knew what I'd done. I had boots on, so my ankles were stabilized with the boots, and I did my steps of the day. Because I knew that if I went straight home, or when I got home, my ankle would balloon up and I would not be able to walk on it. And that would stop me hitting my steps that day and beyond for the rest of the prep. And that is what happened. But I continued to walk for 90 minutes with a fractured ankle until I had done my steps and got home, and then I dealt with consequences. But then we fast forward it. And the reason I want to give this example, guys, is not to, you know, express ego or whatever, or, you know, go hard or go home. It's nothing to do with that. This example is to show you what is possible when you're able to work with your relationship with your food, with your scale weight, and your body. And let me tell you, it has been fucking rough. You've been there throughout it all. To dig down on why I had an obsession with scale weight, on why I was obsessed with doing back-to-back preps, why I checked what I looked like in the mirror, fucking probably 100 times a day sometimes. Why was I doing that? And I was, like I say, shit scared to push up my body weight. And I've never felt so good at around 72 kilos in my life from when I started bodybuilding. I didn't weigh myself before bodybuilding, and then I did. And it became a thing because of the elements of control and wanted to have control in my life that I've never ever had before. And when we're talking about all of these relationships with food, with ourselves, for me, a lot of people, these come from a place of caring about wanting to do your best. And I talk from personal, you know, why did I have these obsessions? Because I want to do my best. And there was elements of, on social media, wanting to be liked, wanting to be the talk of the town, because you get so much traction and so much love and support when you're in a prep and you're doing well. And I must say that, when you're doing well. Right back to my example of Nobody's there, guys, when you're waking up in the morning, when you're weighing yourself, and you're so imprisoned by that number ruling your day, ruling your relationships for that day, ruling your work life, ruling your thought processes, the food you're eating, the obsession with food, with how you look. What are people going to think? I'm shredded and I'm in off season. I'm not shredded anymore. And I've had external pressures of people going, are you not doing the gym anymore? That fucking hits, and it is so hard, because you feel, well, anyone listening that's had this will know what that feels like. And it is so hard for people in this same experience to be able to accept an off season for a longer period of time and seeing that scale weight continually go up, unless you can address these relationships that I'm talking about. And I truly believe, and I've seen this with my clients, and this is not me blowing smoke up my own arse, but my clients are able to exhibit a good relationship with themselves, food, body image, scale weight in an off season, because I'm able to give them the tools to do so. And like I said, I'm not blowing smoke up my own arse, but you often say I don't credit myself for the coaching I offer. You know, perhaps this is a point on the podcast for me to go, fuck, I'm helping people not go through this. And it's such a lonely place to be, and it's so hard. And you know, as a male also, your example of being given the reins of flexible dieting, what that brings. And now I can sit here and say, guys, there is light and there is hope that you can get to the position that I'm in now if you're able to work on yourself. So hopefully you've got a coach that you can lean on. Now I'm lucky because I've got you, I've had my own self-actualization, and Tom has helped me as well be able to do this. And like I say, the example of being able to prioritize surgery over a mini cut, would it have happened before? I don't think it would have, because I already pushed on for 4 or 5 months with bad pain, bad pain, because I was scared that the gym was going to be taken away from me, if I'm honest about it, and what would happen to my body composition. But now the frame of mind and the reflections I've had is like, what the body weight is, what's more important here? Is it the health? Is it the surgery? Or is it what my body weight is? It's my health right now. And when we relate this back to trying to stay lean, and this is why this podcast is timed where it is, because in the mental health series part 2, it's spoken about a lot, trying to stay lean all year round. The effect of that on your mental and your physical health is not talked about enough, I don't believe, or it's talked about in potentially either a flippant manner, or people giving those in and out, educational, the ins and the outs of it to a level that people can't take on. They can't comprehend, they do not understand. Yeah, we can sit here and talk about hunger hormones, we can do that. We can talk about physiological adaptations in a scientific manner. But if you don't understand it, it does not help. So then you're left in this, and that's what I found. I'd listen to podcasts and think, I haven't got a fucking clue what they're on about.
Yeah.
And it's difficult. It is very, very hard to prioritize your health. And where I started this tangent, and guys, I go on tangents, and so does Matt, was, being shit scared to push my body weight up. Why was that? Why did I need to dig down on that? Because what I have put my body through, and this is one prep, what you put your body through in one prep or a pretty harsh diet phase. I've done 7 seasons, and what I've done to my body through those periods of time, I've had physiological kickback. When you push yourself, guys, to these extremes, and me and Nick spoke about this on a podcast, when you go to prep again, guess what? Your body may not respond because you have pushed it too much. whatever vectors you've manipulated to do that, to get to stage, this is what I always thought. I don't care if I get to stage, I'll deal with it after. When you have to deal with your physique not responding, that is a hard position to be. So some context here. If we're pushing for scale weight to drop and drop and drop in a diet phase, that's pretty normal, right? You're gonna drop scale weight. If you continue to try and do that, but you don't have enough time in a growth phase, there is a likelihood that you will find it hard to diet again. Preps in the future will be so much harder. I know from, I think it was my 5th prep, that was fucking hard. So much harder. It was like, I'm doing everything. And like I say, I've never ever deviated from my prep. It wasn't happening. It was not happening. The calories have to keep dropping. Then your scale weight's going up because you're physiologically stressed because you haven't recovered from that previous prep, or you've done really, really hard, your body hasn't recovered. That's hard as well, because scale weight wise, you know, if you're hanging out in deficits, you're trying to keep your scale weight down, physiologically you're in a bad spot, but mentally you want to keep your scale weight down. It's very hard to get out of that, because you may not even be telling your coach what you're doing as well, right?
Yeah, sure. It gets into a very lonely place, is probably the best way to describe it, and you're just there in your own thoughts, your own feelings. And again, you have a lot of time to think. If you're doing exponential amounts of steps, if you're doing your cardio, if you're doing your meal prepping, if you're sitting and you're eating your meals by yourself for a good portion of the time, you're in your own head every single time. And again, when you go into this single-minded approach, this single-minded path of getting leaner, getting more strength, getting more lines, getting more bends, getting more positive feedback, positive responses. You said everyone's behind you when you're doing your diet. The reason that people post every single day, multiple times throughout the week at least, when they're dieting, and then you don't see these people in their off season. This is where 𝗧𝗵𝗲 is, I will always champion that, because she is one of the shining examples, especially as a female, who puts her social media out there year round, and she is, you know, peak off season. When you look at her and you're like, geez, she is jacked.
She's epic.
She is like,
what a great example.
Yeah.
So glad you said that.
No, she is like, and from a male perspective, because male bodybuilders, and you've said this before, like, you do have it easier, because when you get bigger, you fill out t-shirts, you look good in like baggy t-shirts, but also when your muscle belly's around, you're bigger, you're more jacked, especially, you know, let's say especially assisted people, just because you're fucking bigger. Like, it just is, like, you're 265 pounds, you were 225 when you competed, you could probably push to 285, and people, you take your shirt off,
Yeah,
you go to Greece, people are like, hey, Rambo. It would happen, But as a female, again, as you touched on, in the sort of smaller divisions, like, so bikini, like, you are going to struggle to put on, you know, that level of body weight, and then look, as you said before, jacked, and like you lift, and people go, oh, you're a bodybuilder,
Which is what
you have. Yeah, but if you have like a 50, 60, 70 kilo, you know, female competitor, and then you have a 120 kilo male, there's a reason that there's that much disparity between the people being able to pick that out. But again, that's important to kind of take note on around the scale weight aspect. And something that I wanted to touch on when we are talking about prep and pushing into that is, this is something that I see specifically from competitors, is you know what your lowest scale weight is. And then that can also, just like we talked about with, oh, you lost 7 pounds this week, that's amazing. Like, when you have your lowest scale weight, what do you focus on when you come back next season? What was my lowest scale weight last season?
I want to talk about that as well.
Yeah, well,
yeah, that was something I really wanted to dig into, because a couple of great examples, and I'm sure you can give some examples for myself and clients. So I'm going to do a post about this, such a good example of body weight. Now, what we've done through our coaching relationship, I've got a photo, and this is what the post will be: a photo when we started and a photo now. And the body weight is exactly the same, but the composition is literally night and day different. So that's an example of how body weight can change, and it can be the same going through multiple phases, and you can have a body reform essentially. So you can look better at the same body weight. Another example, which is more relevant to your point, is when I first stepped on stage, I got to, I think it was 51.5 kilos. I say think because it's always around when you start putting carbs in, whatever.
Yeah.
So around the lowest body weight. When I did my last prep, I got to the same body weight. And how much more muscle did I have?
It's a night and day difference.
Night and day difference.
Like ridiculous amount. And this is where you are your own N=1 experiment. Right?
And masterpiece.
There's only one you. Like, as we discussed at the start, can you control every single variable? No, what you can do is you can always be you. You wake up every day, you are you. Sounds obvious, but you can have the inputs and the outputs and manipulate as best as possible. But I do get very excited about this with clients when we're able to go and push up and pull down and push up again and pull down.
It's so cool.
Yeah, you can have like 3 or 4 or 5 comparisons of the same person with the same body weight and different things. And you, from the first one to the second one, looks mad different. And then the first one to the 5th one is just like a different person. And it's like, yeah, but that's you. That is you. All that has happened over this time is we've pushed and we've pulled and been consistent, and we've done all of the other copious amounts of things throughout and all the complexities, but it is you. It's not a picture of someone else that you see at 70 kilos or 80 kilos. It is you at 80 kilos and you started off at X kilos. This is how much you pushed up, this is how much you pulled down. And this is also worth celebrating on both ends of the spectrum. When you pull down and you go, oh, well, this was the last time we pulled down. And then this is when we push up after you pull down. And then you can see the benefit. And again, just like we speak about when it's, oh yeah, you're getting leaner and this shred is happening and that shred is happening and that is, it's like, that delta is popping more. Like, look how much more jacked you look than the last time, like when you were pulling down and you were pushing up. Like, laying the relevance, and this is where I think there is that sort of issue in the industry of not celebrating the sort of off season, the growth phases, and people talk about it for sure, but why don't people do it? And it's because it's not celebrated, because it's not met with likes, because it's not met with shares, because it's not met with, you know, comments consistently. And why is that?
Well, it does go back to an element of nobody cares.
Yeah.
And this is a harsh, hard truth that really nobody does care. People see your stuff when you're in a prep and they like it and they cheer it in that moment because it looks sick, because it's freaky, it's different. You're in a prep, you've got a competition coming up, and people buy into success. So if you have, and the talk of the town is a great analogy, because, because if someone is on their route to competition, maybe you're the only person in this town that does it, which is similar to my scenario. But you're succeeding. Every day you're ticking boxes. Every day people see you saying no to certain food, dropping body weight, seeing the new striations when you're in the gym training, etc., etc. And they want to be affiliated with your success. So ordinarily it could be because they're never going to do it themselves because they think, fuck that. Or it's because they've never seen this before. What's this bodybuilding thing? You know, what's this competition? And parents or grandparents are a good example of them. They're like, what the hell? I mean, they start getting worried, but it's a good example of, you know, they may not have seen this before. But they're buying into, oh, my friend does this thing, or I know someone who does that, and they're buying into the success of that. Do they actually care about what you're having to do to gain this success? Really? Most of the time, and I don't, you know, I don't want to say everyone, but they don't care. They don't care when you're on the cardio machine for 2 hours. They don't care when your feet are bleeding. They don't care when mentally you're struggling. And they don't care that you're putting on body weight and you're feeling happy about that. But what I always try to try and install in any of my content, etc., is finding a coach that praises you in all phases, but doesn't just both smoke up your ass because it's trying to keep you as a client or whatever, you know. Trying to find a coach that genuinely invests in you and helps empower you in these phases. And when you do these posts, guys, again, something me and John spoke about, I might do an off-season post and get 18 likes. And I've done a whole long form post. I'm so happy that I've done this post. I've shown you, I've written it, I've read it 50 times, make sure it comes across in the right way. That is a thing for me. And, you know, a lot of intent has gone into that. 18 likes. I think, oh. Now, I used to think, is that because people think, am I fat? Or, you know, do people not like this? Now I know it's because everyone's living a busy lifestyle. Everyone's in their own situation and scenario. And actually, if I get likes from my clients, and if I feel good about that post, then actually I'm going to continue to post it. And I feel like 𝗧𝗵𝗲 is very similar. She's posting it because she feels good, and fuck anyone else. Consequently, she gets a lot of likes because she's, you know, it's freaky. It's not seen, and almost she's sort of hit an algorithm or hit a where it's like, because it's not seen, people are like, this is fucking sick. And she gets a lot of traction on it, and she calls people out for it. And she also says, post your off-season photos. She even said on one of them, tag me because I want to see it. And, you know, when I talk about, back to what you said there, you know, why aren't people doing it and nobody cares? I think there is an element of people might try doing it and then they may be put off because they don't get traction from it, or they're not feeling good in their body. And that isn't something, it's a hard one, isn't it? Because it's so individual. But I would certainly say that for me personally, realizing that health is more important than being shredded, doing multiple preps and not giving merit to what I've put my body through, and realizing physiologically it's got harder and harder as the preps have gone on. That for me, I've had to get to a point where it's like, you know what, the scale weight is not going to rule me anymore. What is going to rule me is how I feel, my relationship with food, my relationship with myself and with you. And that's going to be a very relevant point for both of us to talk about, how you feel in your relationships and how pivotal that has been for both of us. Because we've even said, when we're in bed, well, we can say it, when we're in bed naked together,
Oh yeah,
we're the happiest we are.
yeah, sure.
No doubt about it. It's not because you're just sitting there. That is my most content place, and I do not have any qualms with my fucking scale weight, with this bit of cellulite that's, you know, appearing around the glutes and the upper leg, because when you sit in a certain position, guess what, you get cellulite. I don't have any problems there, and Dan spoke about this with Romana. You love the person, and you know, maybe that's not available to everyone right now that's listening. Maybe that is the problem, and that is hard, very, very hard. What I would recommend is that you talk to your partner about it, if that's possible. And again, I can't be inside your head, and I'm not saying it flippantly, because it may be that you're in a relationship that's not in a good spot, and that is contributing to you having issues with scale weight and issues with your body image. But if you can, talking to your partner about this, because we've spoken till we're blue in the face, there's been tears from both of us about how we feel. And that has resulted in us getting to a point where we are extremely comfortable with each other. And, you know, I can walk around naked and I know I've got, but I know I've got body fat. But I'm happy about that because you empower me and you make me feel comfortable. And likewise, you know, I'm in love with your soul and your body, however body weight you are, you know, and that's important, your relationships. And it's also important to take things with a pinch of salt from people that do not understand bodybuilding. Because when you get comments from people, in whatever situation or scenario, you've got to learn to get a harder shell with it. Again, it's not a flippant comment, but contextually, these are people that don't even fucking monitor their food. And they're telling you, oh, well, you were leaving 4 weeks ago, what's happened? Or, you know, they make comments, and what can that lead to when we talk about the topic today? It can lead to self-restriction. It can lead to you feeling uncomfortable at a certain body weight. If that body weight is when you start to get comments,
Yeah.
is that body weight going to stick in your mind like a burning fork? Potentially, yes. But how do we deal with that? If we haven't, let's do a scenario, if you haven't got a coach. What happens if you start to have a negative thought process with scale weight when you're feeling good in an off season and you get a comment of someone saying, oh, you're much bigger now?
I think it's looking at that person for who they are.
Yeah, certainly.
First and foremost, is because you raised a good point in terms of when you start pushing up with people like, oh, you still doing that lifting stuff?
Actually, give your example of this, because from a male perspective,
I used to get this as dieting was the biggest one, and I think this is common within guys. It's almost the opposite, I guess, in terms of the phases that we go through. But every single time, specifically as a natty, because you're just a smaller individual, just a given. Every single time I would go through a diet, and I used to PT in gyms, and then it would just be when you go to the gym, you're wearing a t-shirt, you're wearing just your normal clothes. It would be, oh, you still going to the gym? You're still working out? Yeah. Oh, you look like you've lost quite a lot of size. Be like, well, you might as well just bury me now. Just put small but small, like over me. You just evaporate me into the atmosphere at that point, because that whole gym session was just going to, at that point, be filled with rage and anger and upset and so much distraught. And then after that, you just want to go and push back up again. You don't want to diet anymore, because no man, when you're looking to pursue your progression in terms of your physique, and that is, you're quantifying that via muscle mass, wants to be told that they look smaller, or wants to be asked if they actually go to the gym and you train 4, 5, 6 times a week. And people see you in the gym. And I used to get really, really frustrated with it, to the point where I would say stuff back upon their appearance, because it was just like, well, now you're just going to get it.
Yeah, but then it starts to become this negative thought process, and you end up, you know, essentially taking on their shit for giving you a throwaway comment, and it can turn you into a negative.
100%.
Yeah.
Because, but then you understand, if you take that, and this is where, as I said before, when we were speaking about how you start to make changes and adjustments yourself, when you self-actualize those things and you go, right, and I can literally think of an example where I was in the gym. I was by the seated row, between the seated row and the reverse pec deck. We were by the doors to the gym, and I was PTing a client, and a guy walks past. I've had conversations with him before, and he goes, are you still training? You use PT people now. And
It's laughable, but it's not. It's very, very sensitive.
At that point, I just looked at him and I went,
I just think, what is wrong with people?
I'm dieting. And then part of me wanted to take my shirt off because I had like a darling 6-pack. But then I thought about my client who I was taking through a workout, and I thought about how they would feel with me having this conversation, and then me trying to showboat and prove myself to this person. And I went, yeah, I'm just dieting, so I'm just pulling down body weight, and I'm going to be the leanest I'm going to be. But the thing with physique development is it's all an optical illusion. You look the biggest when you're actually your lightest. Specifically for males, females is going to be different depending on category, depending on everything else. But certainly muscular size-wise, that's always going to be the case. And if you were to say, where is this person heaviest to the average person, whether you're peak off season or whether you're shredded to the bone, most people would go where you're shredded to the bone. But it's actually the opposite. Same in terms of the strongest, because you can see the most muscle mass and you can see all of these things. And when I briefly thought about that, as this person was saying it, because this wasn't the first time someone had said it, I just came out with that. And then my client turned to me and said, and then just gave me like a nod.
Makes you feel better though.
Yeah, 100%. Because again, it didn't undermine that person. And again, it gave me an example of how to deal with that.
Yeah.
So when it comes to people saying stuff to you, all you have to look at really is who the person is. What is their knowledge? What is their experience? And for the vast majority of general population people, it's basically nothing. You know, people now are getting the nutrition information from people walking around the supermarkets and having chopping boards on display. Like that is where people's knowledge comes from. And that is not nutritional knowledge. Therefore, you can pretty much dismiss most people's comments away, which is easier said than done. However, when you do self-actualize it, then you can go down the thought process of saying you can either just pacify them, so you can just say whatever it is that you need to say that's easy for you, that's repeatable for a multitude of people, and gets you out of a scenario or situation. You can educate that person, so you can actually bring them in on the process of exactly what's happening. And if this is someone that you're going to see frequently, it comes up frequently, and you have to deal with frequently, that might be the best answer. Or there's obviously the more facetious route of kind of shutting them down. And it's probably, as you say, not the best idea to do that, especially if
Unless they keep.
Yeah, unless it is a perpetual thing and their comments are derogatory, especially after you've tried to explain, we've tried to go through this thing. But it's playing relevance on would you personally take advice from this person as well? Are they in a position where they could advise you, where you could better yourself, where you could get this level of information from them that would allow you to progress faster, pursue your endeavors better? And I had this from an office perspective, where he would ask me dietary information, would ask me how to lose body fat, and ask me how to go to the gym and work out and do all these things. But then they would be the ones who would avidly criticize, make snide remarks, or do these things when you did the things that you were doing that caused them to ask the answers, or ask those questions.
Well,
exactly. Or they would implement it for a short period of time, and then it would be back to the critiques, back to all of those things. And I would just look at these people and go, all I hear you talk about is how unhappy you are, how overweight you are, how all of these things are negative in your life. And I'm doing everything in my power to change my own perspective, my own life, my own feelings, well-being, and everything else for a positive, and I'm putting action behind that. So therefore, you could have these 30 people, and all 30 be criticizing you all day long and say these things. I'm still going to the gym. I'm still going to eat my Tupperware. I'm still going to, snipe off my breaks and eat my meals in between while I can. I'm still going to do what I need to do over the course of the weekend. I'm still going to go back and meal prep all of my things. And I'm not going to second guess myself, because I'm sure of what I'm doing. And I'm sure in myself that it's a positive step in my own life. And I'm not asking anyone else to come along with me. I'm not asking anyone to do the things that I'm doing. And I think that is a good indicator of someone who has good intent, good integrity, is when you are speaking to someone. So if that person said what you said, what would you say? If someone was going through a diet phase, or if someone looked like they were losing body weight, or they were gaining body weight, you'd be like, oh, how's your training going? I wouldn't go, oh, you look like you're getting some weight, or you're not dieting anymore. I'd go, oh, how's your training going? How's the gym going? How's your progress going? Like, how are you feeling about things at the moment in terms of what you're doing? Like, you would ask a question like that because you're thoughtful, you're not flippant. And again, I think this is where people use words, or people put words out of their mouth and they don't think about what those words are. They just say them. And they're just filler words, they're flippant comments, and they're things that people either think that you want to hear, or they want to say to either get a response or a reaction or something of that nature. And being self-aware of that, and hopefully this sheds some light on that, so you can go, oh yeah, that makes a bit of sense, or that is probably how this is happening, or oh, I would actually ask a question like that, so therefore maybe I could say, oh, next time when you ask me that, because that makes me feel this way. Because again, not everyone's going to understand how you think, because it's weird to them. And that's fine, because life is education and life is understanding yourself, but it's also understanding how people communicate, how people receive information. And therefore, if someone goes, oh, Matt, you look like you've lost a lot of weight, looking a bit skinny these days, I'd be like, okay, well, I'm on a diet phase, and actually skinny for me is a bit of a trigger word, because I've come from being very, very small, very slight, very skinny, and it was actually a word that was used to negatively connotate my appearance. And it created a pretty stressful time in my life. And I'm really trying to push past that. And I know that you didn't mean it that way, but if next time you can just say, oh, you're looking lean, or just say, how's your training going? Say something like this. That would make me feel a little bit better. You don't even have to ask how my stuff's going. Like, that's absolutely fine. And I'm trying to work on these things myself, because again, we don't want to end up in a place where someone says something to you and that causes a negative reaction. And that's something that we can do ourselves to kind of address those things, think about those things, and try and remove that power, just like we're trying to talk about removing that power from the scale weight, from essentially your gravitational pull to the earth. When you're looking to progress your physique, you're looking to add muscle mass, you're looking to get stronger, you're looking to build your relationship with yourself, you're looking to compete, you're looking to do all of these things. And for the vast majority of people who compete, there ain't no scale on stage unless you've got a weight cut. In which case, that's the only time that's ever going to be massively relevant. And this is where dispelling these myths, putting it to bed as much as you possibly can in your own way. And that's the point here, because you have your relationship with scale weight from, as you said, before competing, not weighing yourself, to me, before being very skinny, like being proud of the fact that I was very, very light and trying to keep it that way, to then the opposite end of the spectrum and chasing it up. We all have our own individual response to this. And there's multiple reasons for that.
And that goes back to actually understanding where it comes from, and understanding, you know, is there a root cause to why your scale weight relationship or your body image relationship or your food relationship, does that derive from somewhere? And that's certainly a conversation to have with yourself. I think that also something that could be pretty relevant to what Matt was talking about there is having confidence in your plan and having confidence in your coach. And this, I believe, comes from a very good example of this. And this is something that ideally your coach will provide you and you'll be understanding of, is a timeline. So what is your timeline of the different phases you're going to go through? Now, sometimes it can be open. So 𝗏's a good example of that. Our little one, our little baby G. So again, I've got to give kudos to her body transformation at the same body weight that is pinned on my profile. It's fucking wild. And it is so sick, because I cannot express enough the trust she's given me as her coach, and her mindset with physique development as a whole. I wish I could gift, and I say this to her, and I'm not just saying it, I wish I could gift that to a lot of competitors or people entering this realm, because her mindset is far beyond her years. She's in her early 20s, and the word she said to me for this growth phase was, I'm not in any rush. Now, how often do you hear that? Not very. Now, for her, the timeline is more open, because this year it's about nailing the fundamentals of bodybuilding, but socializing more, traveling more, and experiencing life more. So we did a photo shoot prep, dug her pretty hard. We were probably 6 to 8 weeks away from show condition. She got a taste of it. She's decided in the future, she's got that taste. She knows what 6 to 8 weeks is roughly going to look like and feel like. Obviously, when you're there, it is a little bit different, but she's got an understanding. So she knows when she preps what that's going to feel like, what that takes. So right now, the timeline is open to this whole year being a focus on creating memories, being her priority, and still nailing the fundamentals. So consequently, we've got more time, and we've still got a timeline, although it's more open. It's like this year, what is the priorities? And then we will reassess in January, and we will get a more solid time frame, potentially. maybe she wants to keep it more open, but we know what the focus is. However, when we bring that back to the power of a timeline for a lot of people that are going to be listening, so how long have we got for a prep? How long have we got for a growth phase? This can give a lot of merit to what you're talking about and tie into confidence in your plan. Because when people make remarks, I personally feel like I'm like, my coach has told me what I'm doing. I buy into my coach 100%. I don't give a fuck what anyone thinks. And it almost has to get to that point.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that's easy to get to that point. But guys, if you've got a coach and you've done your due diligence as a client to find a coach that ticks your boxes as a client, guess what? That brings fucking empowerment.
Oh, yeah.
And it for sure does. And it really does help you to deal with external pressures. If you are inspired by your coach and they are your God, your Bible, which is what I, not in a power sense, but I want, and Elle said this, and I love this. She said, you're the loudest person in the room. So when she's training, I'm there. And it's online coaching, right? But I'm her #1 fan from being her coach and seeing what she wants from being a bodybuilder and what she wants from pursuing physique development. And it's a shining example of how together we are a team, and her mindset again with the growth phase and committing to over 12 months of growing, because she has told me, and I've told her what my thoughts are around this. Next time she steps on stage, she does not want to look the same. So we have a timeline for the growth phase and when we will start the next prep. Timelines, trust in your coach, trust in your plan is big when you're struggling with the relationships that we've spoken about. And I think what would be good to go back to our topic at hand and this last segment of the podcast today would be to go through some common things that affect scale weight fluctuations.
Yeah.
So I would say the top contenders.
Top contenders.
Top contenders. We obviously started with food volume, so that is the thing, and we've spoken about that. But when we relate it back to food, sodium is one of the biggest, and I'm sure many people that are listening have heard of that. Stress and recovery management. Training, which you mentioned right at the start.
Yep.
Use of PEDs.
Yes.
I would say they're probably 4 of the bigger contenders that we haven't spoken about already.
Yeah, I would agree. So you've got water,
Yeah.
your sodium,
Yeah.
and your food volume. It's going to change dramatically if you're changing your fluid levels.
So if we talk about sodium first.
Yeah.
So sodium, sometimes there can be a bit of confusion around. Travel as well. And illness.
Yeah.
We've got 6 things now.
Quite a few.
We knew this would be a long one because it's a meaty subject. It's an important subject to both of us, and it wasn't ever going to be a short episode. So when we talk about sodium, like I say, there's this sort of, sometimes I feel like, and this is not to be detrimental to anyone, I've probably done it in the past to myself, I can't remember everything, but you can overeat when given an off-plan meal,
Yeah.
not potentially follow the guidelines,
Yeah.
and you can blame it on sodium.
Oh, yeah.
But you can also, it is legit. So this is where I said there's 2 signs so far.
It is, and it's understanding how you're playing it out every single time.
Are you being honest with yourself?
Yeah, because at the start, you might not know what is in what specifically calorically wise, and also sodium. So what is going to be higher sodium, what's going to be higher in terms of calories. But as you go through, as you track more sort of free meals or like going out for meals, etc., building your awareness, yeah, 100%. Then you start to understand that there are some meals that you go out for, and they're probably pretty close to your prep meals in terms of like the seasoning that's going to be there, maybe just a little bit more. And then there are going to be other meals that are going to contain so much sodium.
I remember when I found out sushi,
Oh,
that was kicking the balls.
Yeah.
Or, you know, like soy sauce,
Yeah,
gravy.
yeah.
There were certain things, and this is good about, you know, for both of us, we've experimented a lot. I can pretty much, I can go to bed and tell you roughly what my scale weight will be the next day. I will know if there's going to be a fluctuation because I've experimented on myself. And I think that probably actually helps, just talking out loud. I've never really thought of that, but helps my relationship with it.
Yeah, I would say so. I think building your awareness, building your own, as we've said, through this, your own journey, essentially, that's what we're talking about. You are your own experiment, you are your own version of everything that happens to you. If you eat more sodium, if you eat that meal when you go out, if you swap this meal for that meal, if you eat a little bit later, if you eat a little bit earlier, if you drink some more water, like what happens during that time? How much sodium do you need? How much potassium do you need? Like what is your ideal electrolyte balance? And for many people, like across the board, it can be fairly similar from an electrolyte perspective. Water is going to be more indicative of total body weight and total lean mass that you've got, because you're going to be able to pull more fluid intramuscularly. If you have more muscle, you're going to be able to pull more fluid. And equally, when it comes down to your exertion, so when you are training, when you are walking, when you are doing cardio, when you are just at rest and in your everyday environment, are you a sweaty boy or a sweaty girl? Like, are you losing a lot of fluid that way? Because that will also be important. And again, this is where having that idea of how much you need to replenish, how much you need to replace, because if you do go and do a training session, and you do it in a different gym, the gym doesn't have aircon, that's probably going to change. It might be a small amount, but if you're someone who sweats a lot, it could be a hell of a lot. It could be quite a big difference over the course of that time. Do you need to worry about it? No, probably not. Do you need to be aware of it? Yeah, probably.
For your own peace of mind.
For your own peace of mind. Exactly. And that is the case with most of these things. And this is where being aware of these things, so as we've spoken about in terms of food volume, fluid, sodium, as we've spoken about those things, how they impact your scale weight and how they change and transform what happens there. You can literally drink more water one day, or take less electrolytes on, or take more electrolytes on, being mindful of total electrolyte volume, because you do need to be mindful of that when you're manipulating these things. And you can see what happens. You can say, right, okay, well, I'm going to eat this free meal, and this is the one that I'm going to pick. And maybe you're tracking calories for it, like, or in the ballpark of, like, it needs to be 1,000 calories or less. Okay, cool, awesome. I'm going to have something that's like 890 calories. And it's going to have a lot of sodium. It's going to have a lot of things in that are going to be more jacked up. And then I'm going to have a free meal and it's going to be around 950 calories, but it's probably not going to have much sodium in it. What happens the following day? And you're not looking for the scale weight to go up or to go down. You're just seeing what happens with it. And again, this is where that, and we'll go back to the list, but this is where that nuance around scale weight. Should you weigh yourself weekly? Should you weigh yourself every other day? Should you weigh yourself daily? Again, this is going to come down to your relationship with the scale. If you don't have any relationships with the scale, it can be beneficial to weigh yourself a little bit more frequently. However, if you have never weighed yourself with scale and you don't know, then talking about how do you feel about scale? What is the biggest thing that you're looking for to get out of the process? I want to see a scale weight drop. I want to see my weight come down. Do you understand the difference between scale weight or losing body weight and losing body fat? And if not, then that should be something that is first and foremost explained to you, and something that I definitely work on with clients who come to me and they're fixated on seeing the scale. And I have this set out in the goal terms that we go out. And if every single goal is at this point, I want to be this way, at this point, I want to be this way, at this point, I want to be this way. Okay, cool. This person is definitely focused on scale weight. Why do you want to be that way? What are you associating that weight with? And this is something to talk about, because again, as I've said previously, I can move and manipulate your scale weight quite comfortably without ever changing your body fat percentage. And that's just through moving the different variables and vectors. And it does not change how you are going to see yourself in terms of body fat percentage. So this is where, when we're talking about these things, there might be some light bulb moments going, oh, actually, when my food actually introduce this food, maybe you have a little bit of GI dysregulation, maybe you get a bit of bloating, maybe you get a bit of gas.
Haven't been to the toilet?
Yeah, like maybe there are specific foods that you eat and you know that that happens, or in a stressful situation, you talk about stress, when you're stressed, maybe you're not going to the toilet, maybe that dysregulates your GI, maybe you're going to the toilet more frequently. Like all of these things have the power to move and manipulate that scale weight in absence of, because again, you could drink more water, have more sodium, you could have some foods that are a little bit more pro-inflammatory, but still calorically balanced than foods that don't have that response. And besides nutrient uptake, when your GI is distressed, your calories and your expenditure are being saved, which means that your scale weight might move, but you haven't lost any more body fat, be that up or down. And this is where that question will always come back. What is your objective in a particular phase that you're in? Is it to gain muscle mass? Is it to gain body weight solely, whatever that body weight is? Is it to lose body fat? Is it to gain body fat? And again, there are always going to be nuances.
Yeah, for sure. A good example actually I just thought of was Annette's Annette's check-in this week, a client of mine. She was on the road traveling, had a meal at a gala, which was very, very rich. So the likelihood of more sodium being present was pretty high. And this week, the steps were a little bit lower because of travel, etc. And what was very cool about this one, and the reason I want to talk about it was not everything was to the plan that it was the previous week, but we had planned for what was occurring, the gala, the travel, all of these things. But what happened was the scale weight fluctuated slightly. Now, back to your example earlier, she actually said to me, I think this is why. And it was like, this is brilliant. That her body shape changed. So when we're in a fat loss phase, which is super important when we're talking about scale weight fluctuations and talking about this is not Weight Watchers, this is physique development, when we are looking at the physique, sometimes there is changes in the composition, but there might be, and this is what made me think about it, you know, potentially some stress on the body, potentially some bloating, and it's almost like a superficial weigh-in. It's almost like a fake weigh-in, because the plan has been adhered to, but there's been a bit more sodium, or there's been some travel, or there's been some sleep that's been affected. But you look at the physique, and the physique is getting better. So you're progressing for your physique development journey, but you've had a scale weight fluctuation. And that's what's important. And that's why we talk about it in that phrase, is because, so your scale weight's gone up. What's happening to the physique, guys? What is happening here? And I know in preps, sometimes, like I gave that example earlier, I'm doing everything the same. And I'm thinking, I fucking gained weight. I'm on 900 calories a day here, and I've done 3 hours cardio. I've gained weight. How is this happening? What have I done wrong? And this is the thought process that can happen. You feel like you've done something wrong. And I almost think, I'm messaging Stephen, and I'm thinking he's going to think I've done something, but he knows I wouldn't. And then he goes, so what is X, Y, Z? And I go, okay, so I've done my 3 hours cardio. Haven't been to the toilet, as an example. Right, okay, so that's what's happened. Okay, that makes sense. Again, back to Annette's example, but the body composition has changed, and that is so, so important in this realm. And then when we talk about, you know, travel in general, one of the ones we added there, if you're flying, that can cause your scale weight to go up. That can also throw your digestion off, which is something that happens to me, which we found from traveling to Tyre. And you can see a scale weight fluctuation. However, generally speaking, that's probably going to die off within a day or two, right?
Yeah, it's going to revert back to a more normal reading.
Yeah. So then it's like, as the coach, as the client, do we need to weigh ourselves the day of travel? You know, when you arrive at the destination, depending on how long you've flown for, or what you've done, even being sedentary on a train for 4 hours could potentially cause a scale weight fluctuation. Depending on your coach and where you're at, where your timeline is. Do you need to weigh that day? Or can we go, okay, so let's weigh the following day or the day after that? That could be potentially a good call. However, a lot of competitors will go, fuck that, I'll weigh myself every day, including myself. But then we need to be understanding of when we step on those scales, the likelihood of fluctuation could be higher on these examples that we're talking about now. And then you've got to be objective about it, which again, I found very, very hard. If you're still going to weigh yourself, you've got to see it for what it is.
Yeah.
And the likelihood of that being a thing is, you know, potentially quite high for a lot of people, including if you struggle with, you know, potentially some edema, some, you know, swelling, if you're on a longer flight. These are things that can happen to people that are in a deficit, to people that are heavily muscled, so you've got every end of the spectrum there. And it's super important to then add that clarity to when you do your next weigh-in, where is that weigh-in placed? And this, I guess, is sort of, you know, bar the PEDs to a certain degree, unless you're putting insulin in, for training, for injury and illness, for travel, when you're in your menstrual cycle, if you consumed foods that are higher in sodium, if you're weighing yourself around these times, all of these things are going to have the potential to cause a scale weight fluctuation. And it doesn't make it easier, but I think that sometimes with the education and understanding, like the menstrual cycle is a good example that I added onto the list. Most females know they're going to put on potentially a little bit of weight 2 days before, 1 day before, potentially for the first couple of days of the cycle, and then normally it starts to dip off. Some people, that weight gain holds the whole menstrual cycle before and some days after. Some people see it for just the day before and first day. So learning your menstrual cycle, tracking that can help with, if it's a menstrual cycle. We say menstrual sometimes, guys, the chocolate menstruals. I don't like them.
No, you don't do it.
You do, and if you ate a bag of them, you might see a scale weight increase.
Well, yeah, exactly. High in sodium. No.
When we talk of injury and illness, obviously it's going to be person dependent on what is happening there.
Yeah, this is where there's these won't always spike your scale.
Yeah,
these are things that you can understand and track. Yeah, and that's the big thing. Right?
It's cool to do that as well. It's quite exciting.
Yeah, you're building an understanding of your body and how it responds. And we do that when it comes to training, i.e. you do more volume, you do less volume, you lift heavier, you lift in a higher rep range. Like, how does that affect how you recover? Like, we track all of these things. So just being mindful. And I say mindful because we can get caught up in like, what's this? What's that? What's this?
You can start getting trends and that can answer the nuances, and that's a good point.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So all you're looking to do with this is pay no. And this is what we do as coaches for our clients.
we track in trends.
We track and trend. There will be some clients that I know I can set my watch by what their scale weight will do.
You love doing that.
I do.
Come on, let's give some merit to that.
I do love doing that because there are some people that will, if you say that they're going to be in a 500 calorie deficit and they will lose a pound a week, they will lose a pound a week.
That comes with time,
every single time. Yes, 100%. But there are people that will happen, and then there are other people that you might as well put it on shuffle, and you might as well just go, well, I have no idea. And I will say this to clients. I will say, I have no idea what your weight is going to do at this point in time, because we have seen it bounce around, go up, go down, and obviously there is accuracy. There is, that
trust.
Yeah, 100%. You have to have that because. And this is the relevant point when it comes to scaling, is if you are doing the things that you personally need to do to push you towards your goal, whether that be a deficit and losing body fat, whether that be a gaining phase and gaining muscle mass, as long as you're doing the things that you need to do, the consistency and the accuracy will take you to where they are. However, the things that happen on a day-to-day basis and the things that happen along the way, such as the inputs and the outputs, the things that we have control over, the things that we don't have control over, may well change how that looks over an acute period of time. So be that hours or days or even weeks, if we're talking about illness, injury, training stress, those kind of things. It's building your awareness of how that has impacted you. It's building that awareness of what is going on. And it's not paying attention to all of these things, but it's paying attention to the ones that are relevant to you. And the only way that you find out what is relevant to you is by tracking it to a certain degree and paying note to it. And then there are some things, like I have some clients and I don't really care what their scale weight is because I can see visually the changes that happen in their body from either a week to week or a fortnight to fortnight or a month to month basis. And I know that they are applying the principles of whatever nutrition, whatever training, whatever step activity, whatever I am asking them to do, they are doing as best as they possibly can to the letter. And I know that that is progressing where they need to be. And this is where there are going to be those times, there are going to be those people where they don't need to know. And sometimes it's not going to be beneficial. And as you said, there are times where, you know, that maybe tracking your scale weight wasn't something that you needed to do, but you're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
But that's an opportunity to go, well, why?
Which I never got asked.
Exactly. And that is, again, another good thing about having a coach who's going to be asking those things. And this is something for coaches who are potentially listening to do, or for people who have a coach and they don't talk about this stuff, just going, you know what? I've been thinking about my scale weight quite a bit, and this or that or whatever has come up, can we have a chat about it? And a good coach, a coach who is actually there, who wants to see you do well, is going to go, yeah, sure, no worries. Let's hop on a call, let's have a chat, let's loosen it, whatever it is, the communication that you use. And you understand that you're not alone with that, and then you can start to build an understanding of why it's fluctuating, why it's moving around. In your example, why you felt the need to kind of weigh yourself, you know, regardless of whether you needed to, or all of the other things, that have that understanding of doing it. And again, I've been there before, stepping on the scale multiple times throughout the day, trying to predict what the weight is going to be for the following day. Like, and seeing at my very core, all I thought I was doing was making sure that I was doing everything I needed to do to achieve the goal. So the goal wasn't to be lighter the following day. The goal was to be leaner in 10, 12, 16 weeks time. Yeah, but do the things that was written on the plan, and in 12 weeks time be where I needed to be.
And I know I've done things in the past where I thought I'm doing better, but I'm not. I'm going against the plan in regards to, you know, I try and do extra. So I say I've never deviated from the plan. I always thought that extra was better, and I didn't get told off. So I've also had it praised doing extra.
Yeah.
But when I look back, and from what I know now, from a physique development standpoint and as a coach, I know that doing more isn't always better. Sometimes you're going to need to do more, and you're going to need to feel the pinch. You're going to have to fucking crank it. If you want to get lean, you're going to have to crank it. But that needs to be placed and understood, because otherwise you can get to show day as a prep example and you are absolutely fucked. But you can't fill up on carbs. You're so depleted. And it may well be that towards and this is what I spoke about in the self-restriction pod, towards the start of the prep or midway through or whatever, you were doing more thinking it was better, and that's accumulated over the prep. And by the time you get to the show, you've actually done too much, and it's actually much harder to bring your stage physique. And that brings more merit to listening to your coach, obviously, and trying to stick to the plan for sure. And, you know, something that I've learned over the years, again, it wasn't really, you know, talked about, again, not from malice or whatever, but stress and recovery and sleep. I haven't slept well for 12 years, guys. You know, it's still affecting me now, 16 or so, 17 months into an off season. As soon as I started bodybuilding, and I won't blame bodybuilding for it, you know my thoughts on that, and I've spoken about that today, but I'm not going to blame bodybuilding for that. But whether it's partially, which we're looking at neurological, but I haven't prioritized it. But every single guest that I get on the podcast, and I would say some of my guests recently, and you know, they're big contenders in the world of bodybuilding. They're not just fucking little, do you know what I mean? It's like these are oracles and OGs of the bodybuilding space. Pretty much every single goddamn one of them will talk about sleep, stress, and recovery, man. And why is that? And when I had Stan on, I spoke to him and I said to him, which I put in the reel, were you this focused on stress and recovery management when you were a competitor? And he was like, no. But he is now because he's learned from that.
Yeah.
And both of us, speaking from our experience, you know, Stan and I, it's like, I wonder what would have happened and what it would have looked like if I'd managed my stress recovery and if I'd slept when I could, you know, and if I hadn't have got into these habits of, you know, doing whatever you're doing in the night, you know, stupid things and on social media or whatever it is, you know, I used to do that, you know, and you've probably done it in the early days. You know, we learn from our mistakes and we can teach people that now, but when someone, and you said it to me, if someone steps on stage next to me and they've managed their stress and recovery and they've slept and prioritized that, they're going to beat you. Fuck that, I'm prioritizing it. And that last prep was very different because every night I did my yoga, my hot bath, went to bed at the same time and did all of this, and it was regimented. There's no way I'm having you say that to me, and no one had challenged me in that direction. You know, I will do what the coach says. If I'm given praise for doing more, I will do more. So I did it. When you said that to me, that was a big moment where I'm like, there's nothing worth me looking at in the night and not, even if I'm just laying there looking at the ceiling, I'm not going on my phone, I'm not putting the TV on, I'm not doing anything, I'm resting, because that will affect my physique and the scale weight.
Yeah.
I ain't risking it. Nothing's worth me risking what I'm going to look like on the stage. And I didn't know in the early days that more wasn't better. But this is, you know, the whole point of us doing the podcast and our social media and what we talk to clients about is we can learn from it. You know, we didn't do wrong, it's because we cared about it. And, you know, if there's anything from today's episode, it is a lot of these struggles, and I feel like this is important to say again, is because you care. Yeah. You're not doing it, you know, the self-restriction one I did, trying to cut out a monster and all these things that I've done before. When I look at it, I think, for fuck's sake, it's 11 calories. The amount of caffeine I will consume, I'll probably be moving a bit more and burning 22 calories. But generally, we're so invested in doing well. This is where these pathologies and ways of thinking come from. And, you know, that's where I want to end the podcast today. Is there anything? It's nice to wrap up on a sort of sentiment and what you know, if someone's listening to our rambles today, and hopefully it helps, but if they're still, you know, what would be your parting
words of wisdom?
Professor Matt. Shout back out to Beth there.
Spectacle.
It has stuck, Beth.
It has stuck. I would say giving it credit for what it is, as we spoke about earlier. I would say highlighting that point. Something that I really like to talk about is giving yourself credit for what you are doing and laying merit on the fact that you are pushing, you are doing all of these things, and that you are impacting your thought processes, your relationships with everything you do in life. And that is going to carry with it its own adjustments, its own thought patterns. And when we get a client who is a lifestyle client and they're coming to us to lose exponential amounts of body weight, they're not just coming to weigh less every week, they're coming to change fundamentally everything that is done. So if there's a competitor listening to this and they've competed back to back for years, or they've done one season, over that period of time, every single day, every single second, every single hour, every single minute, you have thought about one thing, and that has been to step on stage and then subsequently, what are the things that you have to do on a day-to-day, hour-by-hour basis to take you there. And we always say that if you give yourself the amount of time that you were putting into the thing that took you to the place, so if you're, you need to lose 60 pounds, how long did it take you to gain 60 pounds? If you went through a 12-month prep, give yourself 12 months to come back out the side, if you need it. But give yourself that same thought process. So when you're thinking about your steps, when you're thinking about the food, the meal prep, think in reverse. Think about how you're feeling about food. Think about how you're feeling about activity. Think about how you're feeling about your activity. Yeah. Think about how you feel about your body. Think about how it feels to move on a day-to-day basis, right? Because we can often think about the massive positives and the good things that happen during hard times, such as the prep. You got skinned, you got shredded, you were the lightest you've ever been, you had vascularity, you had all these things, but you're also tired.
You got 100 followers though.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You got 50 likes. Well, you got all of those things, but then you were so tired, so fatigued, like all of those other things that came along with it. So now when you can nourish your body, when you can reverse those things,
Be kind.
be kind to it. Yeah. And that isn't like some woo-woo way of saying like, do this, do that, and positive mindset, positive Paul, or, Pauline. It is just to focus on doing those things and rebuilding your relationship with food. And that doesn't mean that it's in a negative space. That just means that your thought processes around food will focus on one single goal. And that could only, and I use this kind of narrowing the pyramid, right? At the bottom of the pyramid is where you start prep, where you start your diet. That's the most amount of flexibility, fluidity that you have. At the pinnacle of the pyramid, the smallest part of the top, we've got the least amount of flexibility and fluidity and the most amount of stuff that is out of your control. You can't have those other things. And then you come out the other side and it's like the pyramid opens back up again. And this is now where you have access to everything. And there is no specific focused goal or something that has a date in mind where you're going to stand on stage pretty much naked in front of people who are going to judge you. You're at home in your pajamas with a tub of peanut butter. And
If you like that now, really peanut butter.
Yeah,
It's
for
good,
sure.
we love peanut butter, guys.
peanut butter is amazing. If you've got some jam as well, then you better have some toast.
And it ties in with PB gym.
Exactly that. So that would be my take home point, because I think that from my own experience and for what I touch on with clients is instead of beating myself up and trying to eat in a certain way, try and eat in a way that I had associated before as being success, and actually sitting down and thinking about it and stopping myself before I did those actions again that were taking me more into a negative space, I started to understand myself a little bit more. And I allowed myself time to think about it. I wasn't trying to fix it today. I wasn't trying to fix it right now. I was trying to fix it in the future. If I'm a little bit
better one day.
Yeah,
at
a time,
Yeah.
and my thought processes are a little bit more beneficial for my overall well-being. Cool. And what is positively taking me down? I still went to the gym. I still went for a walk. As long as those things happen, then I was still making some progress in other avenues whilst I sat on the thoughts and the feelings. And sometimes in the gym, all I think about is changing those things. Other times it would just be solely focused on the workouts to get some headspace. So I think that is why.
Professor Matt, signing out.
Signing out.
So as always, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, if you find it helpful to send to anyone or share on your story to hopefully, I feel like this, like I said earlier, is quite a meaty topic, and I feel like it will be useful for a lot of people in and outside of the competitive realm. Sharing it or putting it on your story is very much appreciated, because as you know, guys, it's my passion to help as many people as possible and for you to not feel alone. If you want to reach out to Matt or I and talk about it more, you know my DMs are open, and I'm sure Matt would agree his DMs are also open. And that doesn't have to be from a coaching inquiry. If you want to inquire about coaching, then, again, our DMs are open. But if you just want someone to talk to, if we've spoken about something that's hit you today and you'd like to talk about it, there is no hidden agenda with us, I can assure you of that.
Absolutely not.
It's just not, it's not how we do, and if we can help, then we will.
100. Sometimes you just need to talk. Again, you've got a coach and you haven't been able to speak to them on this. Think about it.
Yeah.
Think about how you can approach it, how you can approach them, and try and broach that subject. Because again, it's not something that you should have to deal with on your own if you don't have to. And if you do, hopefully what we've spoken about can help you do that. And if not, then chatting to us.
Or people that support you in your
Yeah. Whatever helps you is the best thing.
So we hope you have enjoyed our rambles, like I say. And of course, this is a bonus episode on a wonderful weekend for you guys. And then we have the new series kicking off on Monday with the one and only Dr. Scott Stevenson.
What a G.
What an achievement for the podcast. What?
He is a legend.
The OG. I will speak to you soon, guys. Thank you for listening.